Many of us are familiar with crude oil. It's a tangible commodity that is part of pretty much everyday Main Street conversation and life. Also, it's fairly easy to grasp the investing side of crude. But what about midstreams, the sector that involves the transportation and storage of energy? You may not be as familiar, but there are some compelling investment opportunities here. Find out why right now on UBS Trending. Hello, everyone, and welcome to UBS Trending. I'm Anthony Pastore. Thank you so much for being here. Looking forward to getting into this conversation today on the energy markets and the midstream markets with the head of energy research at VettaFi, Stacey Morris. Stacey, thanks so much for joining me. It's great to see you. I want to get right into it because I just gave a very quick little tease in the beginning. For those that may not be as familiar with midstream energy infrastructure, maybe you can share what that is in your words.
Sure. So the way I like to describe it is that midstream companies are performing the shipping and handling function of the energy value chain. So midstream is unique because these companies are earning fees for providing services. Often that looks like pipeline transportation of oil or natural gas, but it can also be processing natural gas and natural gas liquids into usable form. Most people may not be familiar with natural gas liquids, but it's things like propane or butane that you probably run into firing up your grill or camping. So this is a space that really helps enable our everyday lives, whether it's filling up your tank with gasoline, turning on your grill for a cookout. But people maybe aren't as familiar with it because it's more kind of playing that middleman role as opposed to being the name that you see on a bill. But this is a really interesting space that provides stable cash flows, nice dividends, and can be really interesting for investors.
Terrific. And I know that midstreams can also be structured as master limited partnerships, or we commonly call them MLPs because we love acronyms in finance. So what's the attraction of the MLP specifically, especially for the corporation itself?
No, that's exactly right. So MLPs are a special structure that receive tax advantages in the U.S. In short, they're pass-through entities, so they don't pay taxes at the entity or company level. And that has special benefits for the end investor, mainly the potential for tax-deferred income. In short, what that means is you get a dividend, but you can delay paying taxes on it until you sell out of your position. So MLPs have historically been really interesting to investors because they've paid out attractive dividends. MLPs today are yielding north of 8%, which is much more than you'll find from your typical kind of dividend income investments. Things like REITs or utilities that investors may be more familiar with. So MLPs are certainly interesting from the standpoint of the income that they provide and the tax advantages that can come with it.
Terrific. Thanks, Stacey. So let's continue on here because it's been a really interesting energy market, to say the least. Recently, when Jay Powell, the Fed chair, came out and raised rates another 25 basis points, kind of hinting maybe that we could see a mild recession. We did see on the energy commodity side, crude oil decline on that. I think people were concerned that if we decline economically, that people will be buying less oil, less gas, less driving, less road trips for the summer, et cetera. But what does that mean then for the midstream space? What's attractive right now for the space for investors? And does that energy decline play directly with midstreams, or do they kind of operate separately?
Yeah, so midstream is playing in the energy realm, but importantly, as I mentioned, these are companies that are providing services for a fee. So their cash flows are very stable relative to your typical energy company. And the price of oil or the price of natural gas really doesn't matter as much for these companies' bottom line. So from the standpoint of being concerned about a recession, which seems like it's just so top of mind today, this is a space that can be more defensive relative to other energy subsectors because of that fee-based business model. Last week is a perfect example of this. We saw WTI oil prices fall 7%. For the week, and midstream and MLPs were down about 2 to 3%, whereas broader energies was down 5 or 6%. So again, a space that can hold up well and has done better than broader energy in past recessions. If you go back to 2001 or even the financial crisis. So from that standpoint, that's a benefit that is just more defensive, but also the income that these companies pay and those dividends can really help your overall performance in a period where there is decent volatility in equity markets.
Yeah, I love that. It's a great side of the story for those that don't really or are not as familiar with Midstreams as you're talking about here, Stacey, that we did see a lot of speculators are fleeing the energy markets. There's expected price swings. But as you just discussed, there are opportunities like dividends when Midstreams, and also they collect a fee. So it's not as maybe volatile a space as you might see energy. So it seems like this really might be an interesting sector or space to be looking at right now for most investors.
That's right. I think certainly for income investors, the yields are attractive because the space has seen some weakness this year with the overall kind of energy volatility that we've seen. So that's interesting if you're looking for dividends. If you're an energy investor and you are worried about a recession or continued volatility in oil, I do think we'll continue to see more volatility in oil prices here over the near term. This can be a relatively safer haven for energy investors. So there's a lot to like about the space right now. And I should also mention that it's a space that tends to do well in periods of high inflation. So typically, these companies are providing services under long-term contracts, and those contracts have annual inflation adjustments built into them typically. So that can be, a tailwind for this space, whereas inflation may be a headache for other spaces. So we like the space from that standpoint as well. And of course, you're also getting real asset exposure. These companies own steel in the ground, real assets, and that tends to do well in inflationary periods too.
Yeah, certainly. Inflationary is a word that we've said quite a lot around here for the last 2 years or so. So it's certainly an important part of the conversation. And subsequently, also, Midstreams have a pretty good dividend trend, and it seems like most companies have grown their dividends over the last year.
That's right. So this is a space where we've seen solid trends for dividends over the last 2 years or so. It's been 7 quarters since we've seen a dividend cut across our Alerian Midstream Energy Index suite. So there's been a lot of positive changes in the space that play into that. Companies are spending a lot less money than they used to in investing in new assets. So essentially, they have extra cash, and they're using that extra cash to grow their dividends and also to buy back their equity. So this is a space that has become much more friendly from a shareholder return perspective. And if you look at our MLP indexes or our broader midstream indexes, it's 80 or 90% of these indexes by weighting that have grown their payouts on a year-over-year basis. So not only is the income attractive, but there's really good trends underlying that income.
Terrific. Stacey, it's great. I mean, seems like there's some really good opportunities out there for a lot of investors. So as we're wrapping up, I know that a number of the midstream companies reported earnings recently, their first quarter earnings. Without going into the specific names or the companies' names themselves, what were some of the broader trends and takeaways you saw from the earnings reports?
Yeah, so unfortunately, Midstream reported earnings last week when everyone was watching anything but Midstream earnings. But the results were actually very strong for most of the companies that reported. A couple companies actually raised guidance for 2023. And so the outlook for these individual companies remains very constructive. They're executing on dividend growth and buybacks, and the free cash flow story that we've talked about in the space for some time is very much intact. So everything actually looked really good, and unfortunately, it just kind of got lost in all the macro noise that we saw last week.
Yeah, I was going to say it's like the Midstreams are kind of like the little kid standing in the corner, but has the entire bag of candy while all the big kids are up front and getting all the attention. But eventually, they're going to look back at that bag of candy and want to be a part of that. And it's clearly this conversation. If it hasn't piqued our viewers' interest, I don't know what will, because it seems like there's some pretty interesting opportunities in the space. So, Stacey, thanks for taking us through, and great to see you. Thanks for being here.
Thanks so much, Anthony. I appreciate it.
Anytime. We'll see you soon. Stacey Morris, again, head of energy research at Vetify. And for more information, you can visit our website at ubs.com/views. That's our insights page. Lots of great content there from our partners like Vetify and Alps, as well as our own chief investment office here at UBS. Plus, you can follow us on all platforms on social media, including, and of course, closer to our heart, our brand newly relaunched UBS Trending Instagram page. Lots of great content up there for you. plus never-before-seen footage that happens right here in the studio for content that will be interesting, we hope, to you. And as always, if you have any questions about your portfolio or anything that Stacey and I spoke about today, make sure to speak with a financial advisor. Until next time, I'm Anthony Pastore. Have a great rest of your day, and remember to keep your eyes on what's trending. See you soon, everybody.